Hey, it's Sam, and we've got a bit of a different video today because I decided to try my hand at creating a Levelhead level. So I will be showing off the level and then going through the process of creating it. So let's take a look at it. So I wanted the level to be pretty short and simple since it's my first level. So we have a bunch of hazards and they increase with difficulty as you descend through the level. I think I did a decent job of nerfing it so that it's not crazy hard or anything like that. Whoa. Because I didn't want something crazy hard. I want it to be pretty accessible. And there's the level. When I created this on my laptop with no controller or anything like that. So that's the first time playing it on controller. So that went surprisingly well. I guess all that's left now is to ship it. And ship it. Now on to creating the level. So I picked a small vertical level to start with and then filled in the background and added walls all around the outside. I had a color scheme that I wanted to stick to for this level. And that color scheme is purple, red, and green. So we've got purple in the background, and then all the objects that I have here are the red and green ones. So that's why they're just sitting there. I've played a few levels that involve descending through layers of the level to get to the goal, and I've really enjoyed them, so I decided to kind of replicate that with this level. So starting at the top left and ending at the bottom right, and then we're going to descend through several layers to reach the goal. So here I'm working on creating the layers and getting the spacing of them figured out. As this is the first level that I'm creating, you will probably notice some struggle with the tools. Sorry. So now that I've got the layers all laid out, we need a way to get between the layers, so I am adding platforms that you can fall through so that you can get from one layer to the next. So now that I have the layout pretty much figured out, I am moving on to enemies and objects that I want in the level. And I end up deciding to start with the saw. I originally really wanted to use the treadmill, but I wanted it to be red and to be going left, which doesn't work. Like, it's green when it's going left and red when it's going right. I'm not sure why I was opposed to it being green because it's still part of the color scheme. When I was creating the level, I don't know if I didn't realize that it was part of the color scheme still, or I was just so dead set on it being red that I didn't care, and green was unacceptable. So I knew that I wanted these spikes to be along the ground because I liked the way they look. As you can see, I originally went all the way across, which is a big no-no. Don't want players dropping down into just spikes for no reason. And that's why I add this step up so that they are less likely to accidentally just fall down into spikes or automatically walk into them or something if they're holding a direction when they fall down. So I decided the crumbler could work pretty well with this platforming. I widened these middle platforms so I could get the crumbler centered, but for some reason did not notice that I then made it uneven. I do fix it later though. So now that I've got a few elements that I like, I'm deleting a whole bunch of the extra objects that I had because I don't want to add too many different things to the level, and I think I can iterate on the ones that I have already to up the difficulty as we progress. Also, checkpoints. So here you can see I am using saws again, just like I did on the first layer, but this time I have spikes overhead that could drop on you, so we're upping the difficulty. And as I'm sure you saw when I played through the level, those saws at the bottom don't stay. They were just making it easier for me to count the tiles, so that I actually had even spacing on this one. And I decided I liked the larger saws, so I made the ones on the first layer the same size. And here's where I finally realized that the spacing was uneven, so it's finally getting fixed. For the fourth layer, I wanted it to be similar to the second layer, but more difficult. So we're adding spikes on the floor again, crumblers again, but we're also going to have spikes falling from the ceiling. And this time I'm being careful to get the spacing right from the start, so that I hopefully don't have to move as much stuff around. Now for the last layer, I basically wanted to combine everything that we had seen previously in the level into one layer. So saws, floor spikes, crumblers, and spikes falling from the ceiling. All the hazards in one. And of course, can't forget to add the package. Now, time to test the level for the first time and fix anything that's wrong. So first of all, I thought saws were stationary by default. I did not realize that they moved by default, so I needed to fix that. I also didn't know that floor spikes were inactive by default, so that was something else that I needed to fix right away. Now, figuring out how to make the floor spikes active was a struggle for me. I didn't know what I was doing. So because they can have a receiving channel from a switch, I decided to just add a switch and make it active and see if that works in terms of keeping the spikes up. And it did work. Whether it's the best way to do this or not, I don't know. It worked, so I went with it. So time to upgrade all of the spikes so that they will read the switch as active and be up. And then also I hide the switch in the top left corner because I obviously don't want the player to mess with it. So it gets to hide up there, and I do make sure that it can't be seen. So now the level's starting to look kind of like how it does in its final form. More testing to see how things are, because at this point, things are crazy difficult. Also, I had to look up how to grab. because I've never played on keyboard before and I had no idea how to. I'm usually playing with a controller. So this last part is way too hard, but I'll come back to that later. There are other parts that I also don't like. Now some of these fixes are kind of cosmetic. I also did not like how forced you were to keep moving in that section, but I also didn't like the way the spikes looked there. So now I'm finally nerfing the ending section because we need to be able to beat it in order to upload the level. So we can now beat the level. However, I don't like it still. It still needs work. Here I'm testing how easy this section is. Basically, if it was a fluke that I got through so easily, because I didn't want something crazy hard. So now I'm restructuring this section, adding more space in between, and this is how it looks pretty much in the final level. So retesting it again to see how well this works. As you can see, I still struggle quite a bit, and even though I do get through and beat this section, I like it enough to keep the idea, but I up the cooldown time of the crumblers so that they aren't crashing down as often, so that it's easier to get through. Just a few more aesthetic fixes because I didn't like how it looked at the end. Now that I was happy with that, it was time to add gems. I think it's pretty obvious what to do, but gems help guide the player and also add a little pizzazz to the level. I don't know. I think the level definitely looks a lot better having added gems to it than it did prior to having gems in it. So I'm adding gems to pretty much every jump, and then adding some larger gems where you drop through a layer when there's not a checkpoint. And that's pretty much it. One last test, and then I pretty much called it good. I was happy with how it was looking, and happy with how it played too. Level code is in the description if you want to check it out. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, consider liking and subscribing, and hopefully I will see you next time.